here this morning. They've been a great sponsor for us. I'm Julian Paton. I'm a research scientist from the University of Auckland. My interest is in heart disease, which is the biggest killer in New Zealand now. What I've done is something that we're all told not to do, which is to mix business with pleasure. So I've had a passion for Land Rover since I was 12. But I'm also a heart research scientist, and so this tour, really this epic journey that we've been on over the last 15, 16 days, we left Dunedin on I think the 31st of January, is all around trying to raise money for rheumatic heart disease. I'm going to talk a little bit about the project at the end of the presentation, but just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into myself and Land Rovers. This is an absolute classic picture back in the day of testing Land Rovers at Solihull. This is a very early Land Rover. This gentleman here is Arthur Goddard, who was the chief engineer for Land Rover, who spent a lot of time at the factory designing and testing Land Rovers, and I was fortunate enough to meet Arthur. And he told me one thing, and that was that if he'd had his way, he would not have painted Land Rovers because they were made of aluminium. And you can see, indeed, the rear tub is unpainted. Unfortunately, he didn't get his way. We all know that they're sprayed with this green paint, being mimicked even today. And this green paint is probably left over from the early aircraft from the World War II, green cockpit green. Notice this statistic, and this should make all JLR employees very proud indeed. It certainly makes me feel, goodness me, what an incredible achievement. 70% of over the 2 million Land Rovers, series Land Rovers and Defenders ever made are still on the road, which is, I don't think any other company can boast that. So just a little bit about me. I grew up here in Somerset in England, in a small village, surrounded by agriculture and of course exposed to machinery. I got very interested in machinery, and when I was around 11 or 12, my father presented me with this. This was a Land Rover from 1953. It's a Land Rover that he used on one of his farms, and he told me that YMF stood for Young Man's Fun, and it still indeed is, perhaps not so young anymore, but it's still a young man's fun. His vehicles have brought an enormous enjoyment. So I restored this as a school project, and here I am, a young teenager driving the rolling chassis. Just got it started for the first time. This is not my father, but an uncle who knew a lot about mechanics, who was able to help and train me. This is the petrol tank here with gravity feed. The petrol tank.
We've all done that to get home in a Land Rover time.
Petrol tank had a big hole in it, and that was the finished product. And then, of course, one Land Rover leads to another. So this is a 1949 model, pulled out of a hedge in the Quantock Hills in North Somerset. And then restored subsequently. That vehicle is with me in Auckland. I've owned that one since I was 14, and that vehicle is quite dear to my heart. You do get sentimental about these silly vehicles. And then, of course, as an enthusiast, you're always trying to find a 1948 model, and lo and behold, on the other side of the Quantock Hills, I found a person with a 1948 Land Rover in the back of his barn, and this is it. And as you can see, it's remarkably straight. And what I did, which was absolutely wrong, was to remove all that beautiful original paint, and ended up with this vehicle here, which was all repainted and beautiful, but probably I should have left the original patina. But in those days, I just wanted a beautiful, shiny, new Land Rover. That one sits in the JLR dealership in Taunton in Somerset for people to see, and when I go back, I go and drive it. And that previous one, chassis number is 488. This one's also dear to my heart. I found this one in Devon, North Devon. It had been dismantled, as you can see on the left. And this is the 205th Land Rover made, the first Land Rover into Devon in the day, and we have a full plotted history of that car. Anyway, so the reason that I'm telling you all this is because in order for me to buy 20, I had to prove to the previous owner that I was an enthusiast. And so that was the evidence that I presented Peter Ma. And how did I ever hear about 20? Where does the story start? Well, it started with Tom Pickford. Tom Pickford is somebody that supplies parts around the world. He's a fantastic Series 1 Land Rover engineer. He does them up for a living. And in July, he spotted on Trade Me 20 was for sale, and he wrote me a text, Julian, get your wallet out. Boy, did I have to get my wallet out to buy this beautiful machine. So it was thanks to Tom that alerted me, and of course I contacted Peter, and I went down to see Peter. Here he is, Peter Mark, down in Dunedin. This vehicle sitting on his front drive, and we test drove it, and we made a deal. 20 is interesting. So if you look at the original ledger from Land Rover, this is R86001, so that's the first production Land Rover, which of course Jim Ratcliffe owns. And you come down to 20 here. The reason I want to show you this, and I'll just blow up this area. 20 here, so this is R86020, this is this car. Completed build on the 31st of August, and it went to Wellington Motor Company in New Zealand. Of all these vehicles above and below, it's the only one that came here. So it did not arrive as a batch. We know it came as a single car, and it came as a demonstrator, and that's why it has the power takeoff on it to demonstrate that it has accessories.
Excuse me, Julian, can I just ask, the dates that line up there, so 31st of August 48 and 16th of September, was 31st of August the manufacturing date and 16th September the time that it got registered in New Zealand?
No, this is the completion date, and that was the time it was shipped out from the factory to New Zealand.
I was going to say that's a pretty quick trip.
Yeah, that's right. And it was first registered in New Zealand on the 28th of October 1948. Yeah. So it probably took around 6 weeks for them to ship it here. Yeah. And I've got this document on the wing. This is the original document of registration, John Gamble Limited, Hay Street in Wellington, and of course we've been at the dealership in Wellington a few days ago. So here's the stamp, 28th of October 1948 was the official registration of the vehicle. It was a demonstrator, so hence you can find online, which is fantastic, the Otago Daily Times, Tuesday the 30th of November 1948. Here it is, brand new, being demonstrated to local farmers, driven up steep muddy slopes, and also it was hooked up to a heavy set of swamp discs. Whatever those were, I'm not sure, but would imagine they took some.
I've got a set of photo I'll send you.
Have you got one?
Yeah, I've got a set. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mark. That would be really interesting. But we all know, well, one of the other things that we discovered was this picture, and that's a bit blurry. Now, this picture has been really important because it's allowed us to find more history. I'm putting it up here because it demonstrates the go-anywhere versatility of the vehicle's Land Rover, but also the fact that it is a fun car. These Land Rovers people get very attached to, as we all know, and this is a wonderful demonstration of the whole family enjoying the Land Rover. And we now know who the driver is. This is Stuart Morrison. He was a previous owner in Taihape, one of the very early owners of the vehicle, and I'm meeting his son on our way up tomorrow to find out more about the vehicle.
You notice he's modified the backs of the seats to be a bit more comfy?
Probably. They are pretty uncomfortable as they are. I've also met this person over here, a young boy at the time who came to Palmerston North, and we showed him this picture and he said, oh, that's me, that's my father, and that's my mother, and all sorts of things. It was just amazing. So the picture's coming to life. Now, we also know that this vehicle, because it was the first civilian 4x4, the first time that non-military people could buy a four-wheel drive car, one of the things they did was to drive it up Parliament steps, and I'm sure you've all seen what happened on Monday. So just to make things very clear, because you've heard a lot about it in the news, we were given permission to drive and park next to the steps, but not to drive on the steps. And you also know from the news that you can see me explaining to David Seymour that we've been given permission to drive park in front of the steps, but not climb the steps. But his response was, well, they haven't told me that I must not drive up the steps. So he decides that he's going to take 20 back up the steps. And he knows all the history. He's very well briefed on what he's doing. So he and this is him driving up the steps. And this is our friendly. And you can see she's gone quite nicely up the first few steps. I thought we were really going to go up. and I was beginning to wonder how the hell are we going to come down safely with all these reporters around us. But this was, obviously this is adding history to this motor car. We're also desperate to find the original picture, and we believe there is a picture of 20 going up the steps back in 1948. And we hope to be able to find that picture. It's alleged that it's printed in Modern Motoring, that magazine, Modern Motoring, around the time. So, for 30 years, this is the Taihape garage in which 20 sat, and we're learning more about why it sat there for 30 years. The garage did some mechanical work on the engine and the transmission, but there was a lot of repair to bodywork which never got done, and the garage struggled, I think, financially. So the vehicle was just left in the corner of the garage. We've seen the garage, we know exactly where the garage is, and we're beginning to start to meet people that had worked on the car. And really it's the fact that it remained for 30 years in this garage that has kept it in such good conditions. You can clearly see the chassis here. I just want to comment on the chassis. This is a pre-production chassis that she sits on. This is not a production chassis, it's a pre-production chassis. Remember, they made 48 pre-production cars, so prototype cars. So it does have a prototype chassis. And there are lots of components that are fitted that are marked with X, which means experimental. All right, so then we left, as I was saying, Dunedin on the 31st, and this is us just driving out of the Dunedin Jaguar Land Rover dealerships, and I just can't thank JLR enough for their interest and enthusiasm about this, but this is us moving off on that first day. Craig, where are you? Yeah, it seems like a couple of years ago now, doesn't it? But off we go, and little did we know what we were about to undertake. So here we are, the first day on Dunstan's Trail. If you haven't been on it, it is absolutely fabulous. We've left all of these dealerships in convoy, so we had a variety of vehicles with us. Just some pictures of some splendid areas that we've seen. And this is also Dunstan's Trail. So I'm coming around here, and I'm repeating this little Ford run, and I've forgotten that the brakes, when they're wet, they don't work. So I'm out of control at this point. A little bit of handbrake on, which didn't get wet, and away we go. But we forded lots of puddles and streams and rivers, absolutely no problem at all, whereas other vehicles have had trouble and had to be towed out, right, Craig? Yep. But not 20. I think it's something to do with the board at the front, you know, we're pushing the water away from the fan.
Like a plough.
And just this is Dancy's Pass now, and here we are coming up Dancy's Pass, again with our convoy of vehicles. No problem at all with climbing with the car. And a nice little story here is that my brother, who's cycled the whole length of New Zealand, we met him at the top of Dancy's Pass. So that was a really nice reunion, and he joined us for a few days. That's Peter Maher's son, 1948, that's Sean Maher's car. This is Peter Maher's fire engine, so this is Peter driving next to him, his wife, and then a forward control Land Rover, which is called the Silver Snail. It's a remarkable car. And then, of course, we've also been shown all sorts of wonderful things, particularly like this. A lovely river, and we had to wash off some of the dust for the Defender. We couldn't find a hosepipe, so we threw it in the river. JLR shouldn't be seeing this, but no problem at all.
That's what it's built for.
Yeah, that's right. So you can see we've been having a tremendous time. Okay, so one of the reasons for doing all of this is to raise money for art research, and I just want to pause here for a moment, because the research that we want to undertake specifically is to rebuild a new type of valve. And many of you will know within the engine there are valves, inlet and exhaust valves, and these valves have to open and close. And what a valve actually does is it allows the movement of, in this case, gases or volatile vapor to move in a certain direction at a certain time, and they coordinate, therefore, the movement of gases. And it's essentially, in the beating heart, remarkable organ, by the way. I mean, 10 billion heartbeats in a lifetime. It's a muscle that doesn't tire. It's not like a skeletal muscle that tires. This muscle never tires. Remarkable organ. If you slice it open and look inside, you can see the valves. There are four. You have an upper chamber, a lower chamber. You've got these valves opening and closing at specific times. There are other outlet valves here, here. But we'll just concentrate on this valve here. This valve here allows the movement of, good morning young man, allows the movement of blood from the upper chamber to the lower chamber. But notice that the valve opens at the right time. So when this chamber contracts like this, the blood closes that valve and prevents the blood going back from where it's come. Now, unfortunately, in conditions of rheumatic heart disease, you can see now that the valve has become thicker and doesn't properly close. And because of that, you just zoom into that valve there, and you know exactly what's going to happen. So when this large chamber now is contracting, a lot of blood is going back the wrong direction. And as a result, you don't get enough blood going around the body and you run into severe heart failure. You get terrible breathlessness and exhaustion very, very quickly, which is not good. So what happens currently is that you can either have a titanium valve fitted, or you can have a valve that has come from a pig or a cow. If you have a titanium valve fitted, then you're on heparin for the rest of your life, which is warfarin. It's a, they use it to kill rats. It prevents the blood from clotting, and there are severe issues with putting people on blood thinners. Lots of internal bleeding can happen. Easily bruised, you can start bleeding almost spontaneously. It's not nasty. It's a nasty thing to be on. The problem with these valves is they don't last very long. The other problem with them is they can be rejected by the body. Let me tell you another problem. Another problem with putting a valve into children is that they don't grow when their hearts grow. So here's a child that's just been on cardiopulmonary bypass, so they have to open his wee chest, and then they have to open the heart, and then they have to put in a valve, and some of us here have had this operation. So
it hurts. It hurts.
Thanks, Mark. This boy is 6 weeks in surgery and he looks delighted, and so he should, because he's just come through a very traumatic experience. But little does he know that he's going to have a lifetime now of repeated operations, and the reason he's going to have repeated operations is because his heart grows and the valve doesn't, and if the valve doesn't grow with the heart, it will start to leak. So repeated operations. Now the other awful thing is that up to 8% of the children will die on the surgical table. They won't survive that operation. And 30% die after 15 years, and 40% are dead by 20 years of age. So what are we going to do about this? This is my final slide, so just bear with me. So we'll identify a patient with rheumatic heart disease, and what we will do is we will take a skin biopsy. We'll take a small piece of skin and we will grow their skin cells in a dish. And from those skin cells, we can turn those skin cells into stem cells. And stem cells are like progenitor cells. They can be driven into cells of any organ you wish with the right growth factors, and we know what different growth factors to use. At the same time, we will take 3D MRI images of the heart, and here is a blow-up of the valve. It's got 3 leaflets, and you can see the child's got rheumatic heart disease because of the thickening of the leaflets. They're very dense, and also notice the hole in the middle, it won't close, and that's therefore leaking. Once we've got images from the MRI scanner, we can then drive a 3D printer to print that valve with the right shape and size, using a material that allows us to grow cells on it. It's like almost like agar when you grew bacteria. So we can then take these stem cells and we can seed them onto this scaffold 3D image of the child's heart valve. And those stem cells now, we can impregnate that material with growth factors, which will force those stem cells into heart valve cells. And we know what those cells are, of course. and therefore we'll end up with a living valve. And that living valve will then be pressure tested, because of course within the heart you've got pressures, so it's important that it withstands pressures. And then it can be transplanted back into the child. And the advantage of having a living valve grown from cells that originated from the patient is that there will be no rejection. It's an autograft, because the cells of the heart valve have originated from the patient, so they will not be rejected. And of course, if it's living, then that heart valve will grow as that child's heart grows. So she or he will only have to have one operation, which will be a huge, huge advance, not just for children, but also, I think, for adults in the future. So no rejection, one operation only, and the valve will grow. And she will be able to jump for joy. And where's the teddy bear gone? There it is. So that's the project that we're trying to raise money for. Government at the moment is not interested in long-term research. We think this will take us probably 5 to 7 years to start to put these living valves into the first human. Government wants quick fixes, they want applied science, they want quick profits tomorrow. So we're really struggling to get what we would call basic or translational science off the ground. So anything you can do to help, spread what we're doing, spread the good gospel, make us a donation. There's a QR code here. I know many of you have already donated, so we thank you very much indeed. That's all I really wanted to say. I'm going to be around for a few minutes. I do have to receive a call in 6 minutes, and then I'll come back if there are any questions. So thank you all very much. Thank you again to JLR for hosting this wonderful spread, and there's lots of food, so please come and help yourselves. Thank you.
Yeah. With regards to the anti-injection drugs, for the children, I didn't sort of hear what you were saying about them. Are they on them, anti-injection drugs, for the rest of their lives?
Currently, they see what they do, not necessarily, because the valve that goes in at the moment is decellularized. So although it's come from a pig or a cow, the living cells are removed, and all that's left is the collagen and the elastin, which is fibrous-like material. So although it's natural, it's not living as such, so it won't grow. So there is a little bit of rejection to it, but they simply don't last long enough. And obviously, when the heart starts growing, they don't move, so they leak. And it's really difficult to reoperate on a child with scar tissue. Scar tissue makes it more and more challenging surgically. Thank you.
Thank you.